So you've gone through the avoidant experience and you definitely don't want to go through it again. So let's get into the top 5 red flags that indicate that the person that you're seeing might be an avoidant, especially a dismissive avoidant. Number 1, love bombing. You might think that a person that avoids emotional intimacy wouldn't want to rush affection and show up so eagerly in a relationship early on. But often quite the opposite. Avoidants are people that spend a lifetime bottling up and suppressing emotions. Early in the relationship, it's what's called the shared fantasy phase. It's not a real relationship. It's a romance novel. It's a movie. It's a fairy tale. The avoidant has not had their fears triggered yet because there's no real emotional intimacy. It's infatuation. The dopamine is flowing. The avoidant is feeling good. And that early connection is satisfying their need for intimacy and love. Because deep down, they do crave love and intimacy. The problem is, once true emotional intimacy forms, it triggers their fears. They don't feel safe being vulnerable with somebody. So they can quickly flip the switch and push away and completely discard a partner out of nowhere. And it can be earth-shattering. But early on, before those fears are triggered, they can seem like they are all in and just showering you with affection and praise. And especially if you have what seem to be shared values and interests with this person, you can feel like you're on cloud 9 and that nobody has ever connected with you like this before. But take a step back. If it feels like they are too eager, investing more into you than they really have time invested, it might be love bombing, and it might be a sign that you're with an emotionally unavailable avoidant. Number 2, avoiding deep conversations. Early in a relationship, it's normal for couples to have deep conversations about emotions, relationships, your history, what you're looking for, what you value, etc. Avoidance, especially severe dismissive avoidance, will struggle with this. They don't feel comfortable. They'll often try to change the topic and keep things superficial, keep things light. And when they plan activities, they might be constantly planning activities where there isn't much interaction. For example, a scuba diving trip, going rock climbing, or maybe something along those kind of lines, a group activity that limits the ability to really have deep conversations. If they seem like they are avoiding those deep conversations, you might be with a dismissive avoidant. Number 3, hot and cold behavior. One day, they're blowing up your phone, checking in, seeing how you're doing, and then the next day, they're barely replying. Sometimes eager to make plans, sometimes they're hard to pin down. And this cold behavior will often especially follow when you had a really good time together, when you felt like you were growing closer to this person, you had a wonderful date and things are going great. And then the day after, they're more distant, they're more cold. That's because that closeness that's forming, it causes the avoidant to feel unsafe, uncomfortable, because that's emotional intimacy building. So they immediately distance, looking to create emotional distance between themselves and their partner. That's where they feel safe. Keep in mind, avoidance. As a child, they experienced consistent emotional neglect. They weren't given the love and the nurturing in the way that they needed. This caused them to feel like there was something wrong with them. They personalized it. They grow up to feel unlovable, defective at their core. That's why they have these walls up, is to prevent their partner from figuring out that the avoidant is unlovable, worthless, etc. So that's why they keep their partners at an emotional arm's length, is how they've learned to keep themselves safe, because they've learned that emotional vulnerability is not safe. Because as a child, the people that they relied on for their emotional needs rejected them, disappointed them, perhaps even abandoned them. So hot and cold behavior is a sign that you're dealing with an avoidant. Number 4, their relationship history. Avoidants tend to have a pretty predictable pattern when it comes to their relationship history. A lot of short-term relationships, and these short-term relationships, typically 3 to 8 months long, are often with partners that are emotionally available. That's because emotional intimacy grows in that relationship. It triggers their fears. They feel like they're not good enough for this person. They feel unsafe because of that risk of vulnerability, and they push this person away. But they often do have long-term relationships. But those long-term relationships are usually with partners who are also emotionally unavailable, because the emotionally unavailable partner doesn't trigger the fears of the avoidant. So they often commit to and stay long-term with other dismissive avoidants, narcissists, etc. People that are walled off. Because that partner is walled off, the avoidant is walled off. There's no threat of vulnerability and they feel safe. They ultimately leave those relationships, however, because those relationships are unfulfilling, because deep down they long for intimacy, they long for love, but then when they get it, it frightens them and they run away. So they're not really able to maintain a healthy, long-term relationship that goes the distance. Look at their relationship history. It is a big clue. And number 5, do they take any accountability for failures in past relationships? Or are all their exes crazy? Or do they have very vague excuses as to why their past relationships failed? Does this person seem to have any self-awareness? Or are they giving excuses like, well, we just drifted apart, or this just wasn't the right person, or this person was just crazy, they were too needy, too this, too that? If this person does not seem to have any recognition of where they went wrong, how they could have shown up better, and what their role was in the failed relationships, then chances are they might be an avoidant. Because keep in mind, avoidants avoid, and that includes avoiding self-reflection and avoiding accountability. This is because accountability goes hand in hand with self-reflection. When you self-reflect, you have to process emotions, not suppress them. You have to see where you've gone right, where you've gone wrong. Take accountability. Reflect on how your behavior impacts others. Accountability is so incredibly difficult for an avoidant, because if they were to take accountability and say, ooh, I did this wrong, or I hurt this person, that would be confirming their own inner defectiveness in their own mind. It wouldn't just be, I did this wrong. It's, I did this wrong because I'm defective, because I'm not lovable, etc. So they don't go there. So they look for external things to blame their behaviors and failures on. And if this person looks like they're not really taking any ownership for past relationships and they haven't learned any lessons from them, big avoidant alarm bells going off. All right, let's do a bonus one. Number 6. Hyper independence, fiercely independent. This person in some way, shape, or form makes it clear how independent they are and they don't like help from others. Big avoidant red flag. And this goes back to their childhood. Typically, avoidants, in addition to that emotional neglect, often experienced a parent that was excessively controlling and smothering, which is in itself a form of emotional neglect, because the smothering behavior neglects the child's emotional needs. So what they learn to do is to not only associate emotional closeness with abandonment, they associate it with losing your independence, losing your autonomy. So as an adult, they assert that independence. They make a big deal about how independent they are. But what they're really doing is they're telegraphing their fears. They're letting you know what they are afraid of. Being independent is a good thing, don't misunderstand. But a person that's emotionally available, especially a secure person, doesn't feel the need to announce their independence because it should be a given. You should be an independent person. You should be able to pay your own bills and take care of yourself. It is the emotionally unavailable, insecure avoidant that feels the need to assert that independence because they fear losing it, and they primarily fear losing it to somebody who's ultimately going to reject and abandon them. All their fears tie together.